Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Medina, and I'm the co-founder and COO at Results for America. And I'm excited to welcome all of you today to our local infrastructure hub session, which we developed in collaboration with our partners at Bloomberg Philanthropies and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, our local infrastructure hub is a national program that connects cities and town leaders with the resources and expert advice that you need to access federal infrastructure funding in order to drive local progress, improve communities, and deliver results for residents. And through the hub, city and town leaders like you have access to hands-on grant application training to secure infrastructure funding, hands-on grant implementation workshops, one-on-one office hours, and other actionable resources. You can sign up to learn more about our program at localinfrastructure.org. And so today's session is focused on how the Rail Crossing Elimination Grant Program and the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Grant Program can help rail crossing elimination projects improve safety, and how cities have successfully used these funds to support safer rail projects. We'll also uncover how cities are beginning to prepare for upcoming federal funding opportunities as well. And so today we're very fortunate to have with us two representatives from the American Society of Civil Engineers. We have Nate Masick, Infrastructure Finance Director at HDR, and Shane Silsby, CEO and founder of Silsby Strategic Advisors. And so please join me in welcoming Nate and Shane, who will take it from here. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity. And we're looking forward to the session and wanted to jump right in with a little bit of background about some of the rail programs that are coming up for in the near future for cities and other applicants to pursue grant funding for. So if we could go to the next slide. We're going to talk first about federal requirements, priorities, and policies, because this is really important background information to understand with respect to what opportunities are out there in the near future. Next slide. So, we're about 1 year into the Trump administration, and as folks are probably aware, there are a number of priorities that have been outlined by the administration in terms of things it's looking to prioritize with respect to how it administers different federal programs. So we see some examples of what's been prioritized with those federal executive orders that have been issued by the administration. So advancing taxpayer dollars to build a stronger and safer America, eliminating the financial burden of inflation, promoting efficiency in government, and unleashing American energy and manufacturing are four of the high-level priorities that we're seeing across the federal government. And we're going to talk a little bit about how some of those priorities affect the rail programs that are the subject of today's webinar. Next slide. So drilling down a layer, the Department of Transportation, or DOT, has several strategic goals and priorities that it's outlined. And you'll see some similarities here between what was on the previous slide as an administration priority and what's a priority of DOT specifically. So safety is a big one. And you can see here it's about making the system safer for all people and creating a future without transportation-related serious injuries and fatalities, which is really important with respect to the programs that we're talking about here. There's also an emphasis on energy and environment and providing for different energy sources, supporting economic opportunities in terms of how funds are outlined, emphasizing Buy America requirements, and supporting the sourcing of materials from within the United States, and providing for the accessibility of transportation by people and by families. So with that as background, then we can drill in and look even more specifically at what some of the priorities are for the rail grant programs that are the focus of the upcoming opportunities that will be of interest to cities across the country. So next slide. So the White House has issued several directives, and they will be updating their notice of funding opportunities soon to comply with federal law and with the priorities that we talked about on the previous couple of slides. So in the near future, we're anticipating the release very soon of the CRISI program, and we'll talk in a moment about what CRISI stands for, and the rail crossing elimination program. So these are two rail-focused grant programs that are administered by the Federal Railroad Administration, and they are expecting the release of the grant opportunity, which is basically the application window for these programs, very soon. Other things that are affecting grant programs that are White House directives are that they've provided guidance on the social cost of carbon. Unlike the previous administration, this administration is um, is providing for less consideration of how the social cost of carbon and carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases in particular affect programs. They're also looking to emphasize and support statutes that avoid impacts on families relative to the environment, reduction in transportation services, or maintaining a safe and stable environment, and promoting economic vitality. So all of these are things that we can expect to see addressed in some way through the pending NOFOs or Notice of Funding Opportunities that are forthcoming for these rail grant programs. Next slide. So some of the White House directives, another one that is of highlight here is that they're looking to support economic opportunities through federal grant programs, including access to jobs, healthcare, recreation, commercial activities. They're also looking to support some economic objectives such as alleviating poverty, enhancing safety, improving quality of life, and then also supporting American manufacturing by implementing Buy America requirements through these grant programs. So again, these are all objectives of the administration that will be highlighted in the grants that we're looking at here. So thinking about how your project helps to align with and support the administration's priorities can help to create talking points that can then create a competitive application for your project's grant application. Next slide. So a few other things that are specific to discretionary grants in particular, they where they occur, they need to demonstrably advance the president's policy priorities. So we've talked about a few of those in the preceding slides. They'll be reviewing grants to revise terms and conditions um, to permit immediate termination for convenience and to clarify that termination is permitted. That's something that we saw changed as the administration took office last year and has now been fully integrated into the standard terms and conditions that are being applied for grant programs going forward. And then there are also grant program requirements that the administration is supporting through implementation of grant terms and conditions related to civil rights and Title VI civil right protections, promoting that domestic preference, Buy America and Build America, and compliance with federal laws and policies. So these are all baked into the grant terms and conditions that support implementation of these programs. And it's important to note too that these could change in the future, that we continue to see the federal directives continue to change and evolve as new priorities are implemented. Next slide. So FRA is the division of USDOT that implements the rail grant programs, and we see here what their guiding principles are, and it's centered around the principles of integrity, excellence, transparency and accountability, innovation, engagement, and safety. So thinking about your own grant applications and the extent to which you can support the objectives or support objectives that align with FRA, you're likely to see in the requirements for the grants an emphasis on innovation and on safety to help to carry out the grant projects that will be implemented through the grant awards. Next slide. So we're going to talk in particular about the rail programs in specific and what they are looking for with respect to theirs. So CRISI is the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program, and it's a Federal Railroad Administration program that helps to support grants for rail service improvements and operational improvements. And you can see here, you get a sense of the types of projects that CRISI is looking to fund through the priorities that are outlined here. And again, you can note how this aligns with some of the things that we talked about that were administration priorities in the previous slide. So we see safety, we see congestion management, we see operational improvements, we see service development and service integration. Safety comes up a couple more times in a couple different ways on the list. There's workforce development. There's research and development to advance innovation. There's emergency planning and emissions reduction. So the program priorities of the CRISI program and the types of projects that it's looking to advance in a lot of ways align with objectives of the administration here. And you can see that in the bold-faced words that are here. Now, we should note that we're still waiting for that next notice of funding opportunity or NOFO to come out for this program. So when it comes out, it's possible that it will change based on some of the objectives of this current administration. But at the same time, we do know that there are uh, uh, certain features of the program that are established under federal law, and those will not change regardless of the administration's priorities because it's part of the foundational act that establishes this program. Next slide. So let's talk then about the rail crossing elimination program priorities. It's a much more focused program, so the actual objectives that feature into CRISI or for RCE are much more targeted than what you saw for CRISI, so a much shorter list here. But again, we see some of those same objectives here. So we see safety and mobility coming up a couple of different times, and that's something important for this program. And you can also see what the eligible categories of projects are for the rail crossing elimination program. So it includes grade separation or closure projects, including the uses of bridge, embankments, or tunnel, or track relocations. And ultimately, the program is seeking to eliminate existing grade crossings at railroad, where roadways intersect at grade with railroads, and using different approaches to minimize the potential for conflicts between motor vehicles and rail, thereby promoting the safety and mobility objectives of the program. Next slide. So when you're thinking about your project and how best it aligns with the federal priorities, I think there's a few pieces of advice that we have for you in terms of how to align. So first of all, you want to really tee up your project to describe how it aligns with federal priorities and be clear and concise about that. You want to use resources that are highlighted in the NOFO to demonstrate connection. So there will often be links to data or maps or other resources that the federal government will publicize in the NOFO. And you want to use those tools to help make the case for the data and circumstances that are specific to your project. You want to use objective data wherever possible, and that could include data that you've analyzed or developed as part of your project, or some of the data that's available from these resources that FRA points to in the NOFO. You also want to be honest about how your project aligns with priorities, and don't try to manufacture something that doesn't exist. Be sincere, and the federal staff who review these applications, they've seen enough of them that they can detect the BS when it exists, and you really want to make sure that you're focused on the legitimate alignment of your project with the priorities. And if a priority that might be one of the criteria for your project doesn't apply to your project, especially for CRISI where the objectives of the program are so broad, just skip it. There's plenty of other merit criteria that you can focus on that probably will be good fits for your project. You also want to make sure that you can follow the directive. So that's important that if you're selected to receive a grant, that you make sure that you're able to follow through and administer the grant. Next slide. All right, I think we're going to open it up to a little Q&A here.
Yeah, thank you, Nate, for that great overview. I'm sure we're going to have questions from our participants here. So I'd like to open up the floor for questions. Please drop them in the chat. There's one already, and that is, do you know if CRE or CRISI will require a BCA?
We do expect that Chrissy will require a BCA. That has been part of past NOFOs for Chrissy. Rail crossing elimination has not required BCAs in the past, in part because most of the program focuses on rail crossings, but it's always possible that that could change because we have seen some renewed focus on using economic uh, uh, criteria for supporting decisions with respect to grant awards from this administration.
Great.
Shane, did you want to add something? You're on mute. Oh, we still can't hear you, Shane.
Maybe while we're waiting for Shane to come on, just on the topic of BCAs, we hosted a session last month. If you weren't on, I'm putting the link in the chat. It had deep dive information about benefit cost agreements and how you can get started. And Jen also just put that, Jen Tolentino just put that in the chat. So if if BCAs are intimidating you and stopping you from applying, please check it out because it's easy ways to get started.
Sure. I see a question here in the chat. Can these programs apply to active transportation, i.e. trails, or does it have to include vehicular transportation? Trail crossing safety improvements are needed in our community is the question. These programs are specifically administered by the Federal Railroad Administration, and so therefore they are specifically focused on rail corridors. So a trail type project would not be a fitting um, uh, uh, candidate for funding from these particular programs unless you were talking about some sort of crossing between the trails and a railroad line and had some justification for that. But there are other programs that are out there that are more recreationally focused or multimodal in their orientation that could encompass supporting trails. One, for example, is the Build program, which just had its annual grant cycle close last week.
Great. Well, thank you again, Nate, for your overview and answering these questions. Audience members, please continue adding your questions. We're now going to shift to our panel of mayors and experts. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce Mayor Misty Buscher of Springfield, Illinois, Mayor Harold Copenhaver of Jonesboro, Arkansas, Roger Feigar, Executive Director of the Railroad Transportation Safety District in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Shane Silsby, who will be moderating. And so our panelists here today to discuss their rail projects and key insights they have for other cities that are trying to access federal funding via RCE and the CRISI grant programs. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Shane. Shane, we have your audio on?
Let's see. Can you hear me yet, David, or no?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Shane.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Thanks, everybody. So you introduced him, but for the panel members here, anything else you want to add about your cities or your interest in the programs? I'm happy to put it around to Harold, Roger, or Misty.
Sure. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity today. And, it's always a economic impact that we all work together as mayors. And a little bit about Jonesboro. We're 82 square miles. We're the second largest actual community square miles in the state of Arkansas, but we only have about 84,000 residents, but we're growing quickly, second largest growing community in the state of Arkansas. But we're very unique from the standpoint that we have a lot of rail, we have a lot of infrastructure when it comes to, we have water accessibility with the Mississippi River and many attributes. So Jonesboro is very unique in a lot of ways. And so we had to think outside the box for this particular grant. We did so with community effort. We did so also by working very strongly with our community rail, which we do have two providers in the city of Jonesboro, Arkansas. So we have BNSF and UP.
That's great. Go ahead, Misty.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us on. Springfield, Illinois is about 114,000 citizens. We are the fourth largest city in the state, and we are the state capital. We are centrally located in between Chicago, Illinois, and St. Louis, Missouri. So we are a huge factor for transportation, especially when it comes to goods. Our rail improvements project is about a $544 million project that our research started in about 2010, and it is anticipated to be completed in 2027. So it is a huge project. It's railroad relocation between the Norfolk Southern and the UP, the Union Pacific. And then it also is creating a new Amtrak station, a state-of-the-art multimodal transportation facility that will have our local bus service, Greyhound, and Amtrak together, as well as a lot of new overpasses and creating less grade crossings, so it's safety for the community, which was a huge benefit for us. And getting our grants was the safety factor for our community.
That's great. Thank you, Misty. Roger, would you like to say hello?
I would. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Our mayor extends her condolences in not being able to attend, but City of Lincoln, nearly 300,000 people, second largest city in the state, has a long history of working with the railroads that dates back to the early 70s, and where the legislature created a railroad transportation safety district in between the county and the city that actually collects taxes to work on conflicts. The RTSD's has spent more than 130 million. We have reduced fatalities 90% between 1970 and where we are today between trains and vehicles. And again, just a long history of picking corridors with BNSF, getting to know them, what are their needs, and it's through those relationships that we've been able to really just work on long corridors. Our comprehensive plan that dates back into the 50s has a goal to have every arterial street grade separated from a class 1 railroad, try to avoid those conflicts.
Wow.
And in the last few years, we've done an awful lot with trails in the area. Lincoln has a ton of trails and mobility, and trying to include those as well with grade separations or underpasses. Our project is another project in about a 6-mile corridor along Northeast Lincoln and the main BNSF corridor that comes through. It closes 2 at-grade crossings at 2 arterial streets, combines them into one structure. It's a $125 million project. And we really thought we were funded, but with RCE came in and we've got a $67 million grant, which pays for 50% of that project. So we are ecstatic to be able then to use some of our dollars for other projects as well.
So Roger, when you said you thought you were funded, did that mean you did receive all of that, or there were some challenges in receipt of those dollars? Just digging a little bit there.
You mean from FRA?
Yes.
Well, we started working on this project in 2014. It was the next big project and started saving money. We went through the selection process twice before we actually were granted the RCE grant. But our RTSD in the county is valued enough that we really felt the RTSD had already saved $50 million and had that in the bank. We have a $25 million grant from the DOT. We have about a $5 million commitment from BNSF as well. So we were close to being fundable. And then if we took several years to build, we would continue to collect the levy. But by having or getting this grant, it immediately meant we were fully funded. We didn't have to go any farther. We could then just continue to move ahead, finishing NEPA and getting started in final design and right of way.
Okay, thank you. Some just interesting points there. So just a reminder for people on the call, these are federal dollars, so you're going to have to do a NEPA clearance. That's the federal environmental clearance process. There is usually a premium when you're working with federal grant dollars for your project. So there's more money you're going to have to spend to get those other dollars. So that's a risk.
We typically, just was going to add, we typically have done our projects over the last 40 years through federal highway, FHWA. This is the first time that we've really worked extensively with FRA. We had our NEPA EA completed through FHWA. We found FRA to be very congenial and open and receptive to reviewing and accepting the environmental document from that we did through FHWA. That was extremely helpful and saved a lot of money.
Okay. Just a real quick technical question. If you don't know, that's fine. But do you recall if you had to do a benefit cost analysis for your submittal to FRA? And if you did, what was the number, if you remember?
I don't remember the number. We had done cost benefit moving up to and before we had provided. So I think we went ahead and included that in the, it was well over one. So
Yeah, that's good. I was going to mention for those in the call, it has to be over one, really, or you're not going to have a chance, right? That means your project has a benefit more than it costs. So maybe moving backwards here, Misty, is there anything you'd like to add? You mentioned that one of the primary aspects of your project was safety, but any more experiences you wanted to share or long-term goals or vision that align for the city?
We went from 68 at-grade crossings. We go down to 32 at-grade crossings with this project, which was a big benefit for the FRA to see that. In addition to that, we had 4 reconstructed railroad bridges, which was a safety factor as well. We also created 8 new underpasses with this project to help with those at-grade crossings. And then there is 1 new overpass that is to be completed by 2027 for this project. So it's a combination of things that helped eliminate that 68 grade crossings to 32 grade crossings, which I know we have HDR on the call, and you need a great engineering firm to help you create that plan as a mayor. So that is something that we cannot do alone. We need great engineering firms to assist us with that. We used funding through, with the federal government, we used FSP funding, we used CRISI funding, we used RAISE, Tiger, and RCEP funding, all from the federal government. So we layered federal funding for our project. Then Illinois Department of Transportation, our governor, J.B. Pritzker, had a Build Illinois program we tapped into for this as well. Illinois Commerce Commission had some grants we got, and then the city used motor fuel tax dollars. Sangamon County put some money in, and then the Norfolk Southern and Union Pacific paid a small portion as well. So it's a combination of money, state, federal, local, county, and then the railroads. So you also have to really be creative in how your funding is going to happen, I guess, for the mayors on the call that are interested in a project like this.
That's great. And I should have said Mayor Busher, I'm sorry.
You're good.
So 2 things maybe as follow-ups. One is we've seen that partnerships those projects that have major partnerships tend to score a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Was that kind of your experience? They said, man, we have so many people involved in this that we just have to do our piece to fund it.
Yeah, the Secretary of Transportation for Illinois Department of Transportation wrote a support letter for us with all of our grant applications and also committed funding, as well as the Sangamon County Chairman. That's the county the city is located in. And then, of course, the mayor. So it showed that it had support from the state, county, and local level, which I think helped with our grading of our application. And it definitely is something that I could not do alone, nor could the county or the state. It needed all of us together to make this happen. And so I think creating those partnerships as a mayor is something that I lean into very heavily. Our Secretary of Transportation just recently retired in December. We have a new one, and I'm already creating relationships with her because it's really important for us as mayors that we have those relationships in order to get projects like this started off the ground and then funded so they can come to fruition and the entire community benefits from it. So
that's great. One quick follow-up before we move to Mayor Copenhaver. Do you remember, and if not, that's fine, because of all the federal agencies you had working on this, from an environmental clearance standpoint, the federal government is supposed to be managing the environmental clearances through one federal decision. So one agency takes the lead and works with the other agencies. Did you find that to be the case for your project, or did you have to work with each agency independently for the clearances?
That was the case for us, and we leaned heavily into the FRA. They did a lot of this project for us. We were very lucky in the fact that we have a Congressman, Darren LaHood, that really leaned into this. His father, Ray LaHood, used to be the Secretary of Transportation. So right. He's from Illinois, and he really wanted to see this happen. So we really were lucky there as well. Just all the stars aligned for us. And then as a side benefit, many of you may not know, but in 2014, during the property acquisition where we were clearing property, in the 1908 race riot is a riot that happened in Springfield, which created the NAACP. From that riot, foundations of 7 homes from that riot that had been burned were found while we were doing excavation. So we stopped. We had an archaeological dig, And then President Joe Biden, through the Antiquities Act, created a national park in that area for us as well. So without this railroad relocation project, we would have never had found those foundations of those properties. So it also created a national park for Springfield through this project.
That's interesting. Just shows what can come up during a project, right? You never know. But
Yeah.
the earlier point you made, I think, is good for those on the call, that you did have a federal agency, FRA, take primacy. That meaning they're going to be the lead agency for the federal decision on environmental clearance. So that's important. So as we go to Mayor Copenhaver, you mentioned a few things in your intro, but other things you wanted to talk about your projects that aligned with maybe your city's long-term visions or incomes or outcomes, or things you felt like made your application a differentiator that helped you win?
I think number one, I want to say, man, great job, Misty and Roger. I mean, that's those are where we want to be, and so we're in the planning stages, and
Got
so
it.
we had to think outside the box on what we needed to do. And I mentioned our partners, but our one of our larger community partners is Riceland Foods, and with that, they have a lot of train, obviously in and out. But we were also seeing that our medical emergency systems were being held up due to stopped trains. And as you all know, that's a problem in our communities. And so we have 44 at-grade crossings in the city of Jonesboro. But what we did, we really built a relationship with BNSF, and UP is going to be on the next step. But in doing that, we did community relationships with Rice and Food. So we got along with their employees. We did interviews with their employees, their entire staff. So this was in the application process as well on the immediate needs that they were seeing as well for their transportation and then our community safety. So we did proper planning. We had a long range vision plan. It goes along with our long range community plan. And with that, we're studying 18 at grade crossings. And then we built the partnership with BNSF. And I think it's really unique. And I heard y'all mention earlier as well, you partnered with many other partners, but BNSF then partnered with us on the cost of this project. So it's a $1.2 million project. It's an 80-20. And so the city put in 150,000, and then BNSS also did 150,000 on their part. So that allowed us then for the community to really understand that, hey, we're saving taxpayers' dollars, but at the same time, it's better for our commuters, our visitors, and regional mobility and freight infrastructure for Jonesboro.
That's great. And I know Nate and I have worked with some of your staff from Jonesboro trying to put in applications. So they've been doing a great job trying to get you some cash there.
Yeah.
Wanted to also follow up and ask you, to the extent you're comfortable with it, if you wouldn't mind talking about some of the local challenges of the project, or trying to implement the project if it does get funding, and then how that funding would help you solve or leverage the local dollars to transform your community's ability to address railway safety. So basically, what are the challenges of implementing those projects for any city? It's not easy to do rail projects because it's very disruptive, but how does it affect Jonesboro? And then what are your thoughts about how that would make the community more safe if those projects were implemented?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think as all mayors, number one priority is usually always safety for our community. And
Right.
so with this, we had to look at the safety hazards that currently are in place. And obviously, we've had some fatalities at some of our intersectionals and at grade crossings. We have a large university in Arkansas State University that's really right in the center of Jonesboro, Arkansas. So we have a lot of student traffic and mobility. We have 14,000 students that attend that university. And so emergency response delay was really one of the largest developing portions of this grant application, because we were seeing delays, and I mentioned 82 square miles. Sometimes we would have 3 to 4 miles of our track blocked by trains, and we don't have the fortunate efforts of a lot of overpasses. So eliminating these, now we can build in for our future request of overpass. And we know those come with $50 million questions, right? And so we have to do the planning first. And so those were some of the unique challenges that we did. I'm excited, though, from the standpoint that we need to improve and enhance the safety as the number one ability, but 20% of my community also walks. And so we're seeing public walkability and the safety and being able to provide that transportation piece as well to our community. So the community engagement piece was really big in our application. And Shane, I know y'all worked with us on that, but number one, I can't say enough about you got to make those relationships with your rail partnerships. Jonesboro's unique. We have 6 miles of rail out in our industrial park that we own. And so there's a lot of interest when you have that type ownership in rail. And so you have rail companies that want always the ability to have access to that. So with that, we garnered that relationship, our community relationship, the safety, number one was the priority in moving forward with the process.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mayor. And I was just pulling up the map to refamiliarize myself with your project. And like many communities, you have the rail that basically goes right through the middle of your city, right? And divides neighborhoods from job centers, from universities. And, you know, in the early days, that was probably great. Everybody focused around the rails, and that was when the train came through, and that's how they got from A to B. But now people are moved away from that, and that becomes a barrier for trying to do things, emergency response, people getting to work, all those elements. So I think
Correct.
you're right on the nose about, as communities evolve, safety becomes an issue, and then these projects have to address that. So
That's right.
that's great. Moving back, there was a question, Mayor Busher, in the chat about the percentage that the railroads contributed for your project, to the extent you know. But that kind of leads me into my next question for you is Springfield's ability to work effectively with Amtrak and those railroads for the project. Is there any, you mentioned all those partnerships, but are there any points that you want to dive into a little bit more that you felt, to the extent you recall, what made those partnerships more effective to be able to work on such a huge project?
Sure. The percentage the railroads contributed was less than about 2%. It wasn't a ton, but it was a little bit. And their portion is more relocating their own railway, the bridges that were their ownership, they own those bridges, are not ours. So their contribution is the bridges that we had to have reconstructed from them. There were 4 of those. As far as the partnerships, again, the perfect storm. We had a House representative at our local state house who then became a lobbyist for the railroads, for all of them. Same as Representative Tim Butler. It was Representative Tim Butler, now it's Tim Butler. And so Tim was instrumental in helping us marry the railroads together. I don't know if anyone from the railroads are on the call, but sometimes they don't want to get along. I'm sure some of us have found that. So Tim was really intricate in helping us get that communication piece and everybody together and trying to work together, because you're asking, a railroad to accept another rail line on their line. And sometimes it's not a popular thing. And then if you travel to Europe, they have 2 rail lines. They have their commercial rail line and then their passenger rail line. Well, in our states, we've decided to make all that one, which makes it a little bit more difficult here. For like high-speed rail versus in Europe. So we've kind of changed things in our states. But that relationship with the railroads is really important. And we're working towards, we already funded a study to see about our 19th Street corridor. We only have 1 train on that corridor now, and we're trying to get that on these same tracks so that we can hopefully vacate that and then create the old 3rd Street tracks that we are vacating. In addition to that, a project we call the Link, LINC, linking the city together as a linear green space. And we let the community vote on the logo, but we are the home of Abraham Lincoln. So they loved the Link, LINC as our name. And oddly enough, on our new railroad relocation on the 10th Street tracks that we are at, President Lincoln gave his goodbye address to Springfield in 1861 at the Lincoln Depot, which is right next door to our new transportation hub. So there's tons of history here with all of this as well, which I think makes us appealing for this project. But again, there is a desire to make a high-speed rail between Chicago and St. Louis, and we are centrally located. So we're in the middle of that. We had Tim Butler, we had Congressman LaHood, we had state support, local support, county support. It really was the perfect storm. I can't say enough how important that was. And I saw a question in the chat about who helped us with our pre-reward grant activities staff-wise. Again, I spoke out, and we have HDR on the call, but finding an engineering firm, and as you said, Shane, you and Nate helped Mayor Copenhaver with his applications. We leaned heavily into an engineering firm to help us with all of that. The city does not have the resources or the funding to hire all those staff members internally. That's why we need our partners that are outside of the city. So I recommend that someone find a partner like you and Nathan to help them with that, because it's really, really important. And that's what became successful for us.
Yeah, it's an important point that if you are expecting your staff to know everything about a federal grant when they may only have to do it once in their career, that can be a tall challenge, right? They might do 99% of the things in their job great, and you're going to ask them to work on 1%, which is a whole new thing, even for experts in the federal arena. So I think that's a good point to work with partnerships. So Roger, as we move to you on Fort Wayne, which I spent a couple years in Fort Wayne, so I appreciate what you're doing there. Can you talk a little bit about how the federal investment or future federal investment in those grade crossing projects might improve the safety for Fort Wayne residents, especially as they try to access jobs, healthcare, other community spaces? And maybe that deals with where the project's actually located in the city and how the neighborhoods are broken up or the transportation corridors are laid out.
Flip of tongue, it's not Fort Wayne, it's Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, sorry, Fort Wayne. Sorry, I got the wrong.
Lincoln. That main BNSF corridor that runs kind of diagonally through Lincoln really separates the north side of town from the south side of town. We've got our bus transit operator has only got a couple of bridges to go across. And with this project, we're able to provide some additional StarTran routes. And it's been a challenge just over the years. And, you know, sometimes engineering, there isn't always a perfect solution. And sometimes things just drag and drag. But we certainly, there's more than 3.5 hours of delay at those two at-grade crossings every day with the trains running up and down that corridor. There have been fatalities. Every day I cringe when I see somebody behave poorly and go around a gate or over a median or do something they shouldn't do. So certainly, and with that main corridor, it isn't just vehicles, bicyclists, pedestrians, those modes of transportation are severely hampered between the north side of the tracks and the south side of the tracks. And our new structure builds wider than necessary sidewalks, trails, and some underpasses so that folks can continue to use whatever mode that they want, as well as improve the safety.
Appreciate that, Roger. Sorry for the Fort Wayne reference. We had somebody that went through our grant program from Fort Wayne, and his name was Roger. So let me just share this real quick, just to give an example of what I think makes for a good application. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, David. But simply looking at, let's say, Lincoln, Nebraska, I mean, you can see right here, this is probably your downtown in this area. You have the whole rail yard right out to the west, right here.
Yeah.
And that's all coming in through one point across the bridge and probably putting all that traffic of the rail lines right here. So anybody trying to access your city, east, west, north, south, they're going to be impacted by one of those 2 to 3 rail lines, I presume, right?
That is true. And if you move a little bit up and to the right, that's where the major corridor then goes on out through that corridor. And our project is just to the right of those ball fields that were right down there by the Shamrock. So, and again, but that's about a 6-mile long corridor. And I think our success was, when I started as a city engineer in 1990, was sitting down with the railroad and just talking about their long-term goals. One of the biggest challenges is when you don't understand the needs and the priorities for the railroad, it's very difficult then to partner with them and get things done. And when we started talking about corridor protection all the way through there, then we just picked off project by project, one at a time over the last 30 or 40 years. And there was always a plan to keep moving. The challenge with the railroads quite often is staff changes and people moving. You build a relationship with one individual and then they're gone. But the other thing I was going to say, in the early 70s, Lincoln had more than 200 at-grade crossings with streets in Lincoln. Today we have just about 100. We've closed that many. There were some bankruptcies. We don't get all the credit. And then continuing to build the grade separations on the arterial streets.
Yeah, important point in the progress you're making, because that demonstrates a trend for what you're trying to do, and your grant is trying to follow on with that.
Yes.
I did want to just highlight from a data standpoint real quick. One of you mentioned, or maybe it was you, Roger, that you had a fatality or two. That's always bad. However, you want to harness those statistics, right, for your applications, because there's a couple different screens that happen, right? There's the technical screen comes in, minimum requirements, more technicians reviewing your application. You want to get through that process, which can be heavily based on objective things, right?
Yes.
Crashes, fatalities, incidents, before it gets to a senior management review at a federal agency. So using that data can really help you push your application through, even if there is changeover of positions, because the data stands on its own. The benefit cost analysis can stand on its own. So some thoughts there. Thanks, Roger. I want to do a quick check-in, David, on timing. How are we doing?
Yeah, I think there are one or two questions in the chat, so maybe if you take those and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. So my colleague Kevin Chen was asking for Mayor Busher, how many local and federal grants were secured for your projects, and how long did that process take? I'm sure with your leadership, it only took a couple of weeks, Mayor, but tell us what happened there. So how many and how long?
This project has seen 3 mayors, just so you know. So it has to continue forward those relationships. And we do have term limits here. So it started in 2010 and this is 2026. So, but we have had a little around $375 million in federal funding. The state of Illinois has kicked in about 190 million, and then the county and the city have made up the difference. It has been a huge lift from our federal and state government to help us with this project.
Okay, thank you for that. There's also a follow-up question, and this reminds me, for those trying to enter into a rail project, understand that if you're going to affect the rail line, you've got clearance to deal with if you're going over or under, which can be a challenge, and different rail companies can have different clearances. So you got to be careful there. And then if you're going to affect the rail line itself, right, just moving that line up or down an inch can have, football fields worth of impact in either direction, affecting businesses, access points, utilities, all of that. So that's why these projects get expensive really quickly. And to that point, my colleague Kevin Chen asked, how was or will, if your project is going forward, will rail service be disrupted? How will that disruption be accounted for in your respective project phases? So I don't know if you all have thoughts about that. Go ahead, Mayor.
Our old corridor is still, as we're creating this new one, actively being worked with both of those, Norfolk Southern and the UP, and then Amtrak. And then they'll all converge to that one new railway when it's complete. I can't say that this project has not gone without complaints from the community. We've had to close major intersections because we have to create new water mains that are stronger and heavier under the new railway, and just infrastructure itself, which a lot of that money came from the city to do those things because we own our own water distribution facility here. But community members are very loud when they don't have an intersection open. So it does create disruption in the community as you're making this wonderful project happen. Not everyone appreciates what's going on. So you will get some negative feedback. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I can add to that too. We were fortunate many years ago to receive a Tiger grant when it was called a Tiger grant. And obviously we worked out a system to where we were able to build an additional overpass to offset the traffic while that overpass was being built. But again, you're always going to have those complaints. But that's a part of growth, and that's a good problem to have. And so it's a good challenge for any mayor to really address that. But, just hearing the other ones on the call today, it gives you the confidence that, hey, they've already reached where I'd like to go. And so I'm going to be really, enhancing my phone conversations with these two individuals as we move forward in our process.
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind there. One is that the projects do take a long time, and so these crossings can be down for quite a time. And you're likely to get complaints from your constituency about that, as Mayor Busher said, but you're also likely to get complaints every day about the trains, right, creating delays in your community. So uh, you can't really win other than, at least if somebody sees something moving forward, maybe there'll be a little bit less reduction there in increase in the empathy. The other thing I just wanted to say when we're talking about disruption is that in many cases, if you're affecting the tracks as part of your project, the rail company or the agency might have to create what's called a shoe fly, which is they build a parallel rail line in the corridor. So again, that can add to the time and cost of the project, and it can have people think, oh, I see the new rail line there, but that's just temporary in nature, right? So just for community impacts to understand, those rail lines have to keep moving. And so that's a piece of the project that you can't really control. So anything you wanted to add on that, Roger, from what you heard?
Well, we won't really interrupt much of the main BNSF traffic. There is a couple of short lines that do some switching in there that we're working on some connectivity, but our viaduct goes over. We think we can keep them going most of the time. Maybe a secondary issue is there's a federal flood control project in the same area in which a short line and BNSF railroad bridges create a flooding problem. So we've also included trying to work with the railroad to see whether or not those bridges can be replaced, extended, and how you do that, like you say, either with a shoe fly, or can you do one track at a time and extend a bridge and do some of those kind of things. But Lincoln is heavy on public involvement. We have a lot of neighborhoods with very strong opinions, businesses with strong opinions, driveways, access. Everybody wants a drive to their front door, but in safety and security, you just can't do that. So we spent extra time working on how to maintain a reasonable amount of temporary service, permanent service, while construction is going on. And so far, we've got a project laid out that really should not keep BNSF from having any issues. That's also the main line for Amtrak that comes through town. They operate there on BNSF. So we're trying to make sure we aren't doing anything that interfere with their schedules as well.
Yeah, speaking of timing and schedules, I want to give my colleague Nate Masick an opportunity to weigh in if there's something I missed or should have highlighted. But the new releases, the FY27 releases, are not yet published, but it's important that you prepare. You have phases of your projects laid out. You have your capital improvement program that's pointing out what needs to be done, because as soon as that notice of funding opportunity is released, the clock starts. You have a deadline, right? So it's too late generally to prepare once the notice of funding opportunity comes out. So you got to target the project, target the phase, prep it, know that you're going toward that program, and then once it gets released, be ready to go. So Nate, what should have I said, or what do you think about all this?
Well, that's exactly right, Shane. You need to be ready to jump on it early and have your ducks in a row, because we are hearing some intel that the next Chrissy grant application, for example, may come out within 2 weeks, and it may have an application window as short as 30 days compared to 60 to 90 days that we've seen from past application cycles. So that's a very, very fast time frame to prepare an application, and especially the elements, for Chrissy, because the BCA is required. That would require that to be in order to provide that along with the application. And we're also hearing that some other federal programs may have applications within the same time frame. So that puts a crunch on the capacity of teams to help support applications. So there's a lot of different moving parts to be mindful of, and really get your ducks in a row now to help support a timely application once the window opens in a few weeks.
Good points, Nate, especially on capacity, right? As soon as it opens, your favorite engineering firm or strategist, they might be booked up, right? So important to get ahead of that. And a benefit cost analysis, very difficult to get done in a month, right? So just be aware of that. And then our colleague Jamie Lavin, I saw put a note in there about some of the resources they have through the local infrastructure hub. So that's great. Uh, David, how are we doing on time? Just want to check in with you real quick on that.
Yeah, I think at this point I'd like to thank Mayor Busher, Mayor Copenhaver, Roger, Nate, Shane, all of you for joining us today. As you were just saying, Shane, for more information about the RCE and CRISI grant programs, we encourage everyone to take a look at our rail safety guide, which you see on your screen here. You see the QR code, and we also added a link in the chat. But before we close today, we really hope you'll take the 4 minutes or so that'll take you to complete a short survey, which we're sharing here on this webinar, and we'll also be sending it to you via email. This survey will help us improve our local infrastructure hub resources. It's a survey that's being operated by Owen Consulting Incorporated, and so all responses will be confidential. So again, we're sharing that survey with you now, and you'll also be getting it via email. And one last thing before we go, we'd also like to highlight two of our upcoming webinars that you can see on your screen right now. On March 17th, we'll be hosting a webinar entitled Safe Streets, Stronger Communities, Preparing Competitive Applications for SS4A. And on March 31st, we'll be hosting another webinar entitled From Grants to Infrastructure Systems, Implementing and Sustaining Federal Investments. So you can find everything we've talked about today, including more information about these webinars, on our website, localinfrastructure.org. We thank you all for joining us and hope you learned as much as we all did today. Thank you.